The Maternal Thread by C.J. Van Pletsen. The burden of voices. Morning found him unchanged in the world's eyes. The bell clanged with its usual brass indifference. Teachers marked his presence with a scowl. Pupils mocked him in whispers that pretended to be jokes, but dripped with the venom of fear. The world spun on, blind to the fire kindling beneath his ribs. But within him was storm-heavy, circling, unspent. In dreams, the matriarchs of Israel visited him, their voices braided like a hymn sung through centuries. Sarah's laughter came first, not cruel, but dangerous in its defiance. The laugh of one who dared mock the impossible and found herself holding it in her arms. Then Rebekah's sharp command, urgent as flint striking steel, her words twisting destiny with maternal cunning. Jacob, not Esau. Then Rachel's cry, aching and desperate, a barren heart begging God to open its gates, weeping not for herself alone, but for the generations that would never come. And Leah silent, hidden strength, unloved yet unbroken, whose womb bore kings, though her name was whispered with dismissal. They came in fragments, in sighs, in tears pressed into the fabric of his sleep. He did not yet know why they chose him, why women dead millennia reached through the veil to speak in a soldier's silence. But he felt their weight. Their ache became his ache. Their strength rooted itself in him like oak roots splitting stone. Waking did not free him. He found his fingers wandering on frost-glazed windows, tracing circles, vines, stars. The patterns came unbidden, drawn by a hand moved as if by a memory older than flesh. They did not resemble the crude glyphs of classrooms. They were closer to constellations, maps of heavens or of bones. He did not know their meaning, but when the morning sun thawed them away, a grief struck him as if something precious had been half remembered, half forgotten. Later, years later, the Brotherhood of Ash would tell him such markings were echoes, signatures of a covenant older than kings, older than scripture written on calfskin, older than fire burned on altars. They would say his hand was not inventing, but remembering. But in Silesia, alone, he only knew that the shapes would not let him rest. The burden of voices grew heavier by the day. They spoke not with command, but with presence. He carried them into meals, into lessons, into the ache of nights where boys snored around him. Their sorrow pressed on him until he walked like a man already beneath a crown. Yet no one saw it. To teachers, he was distant. To boys, a ghost in uniform. Only he knew that silence had become a cathedral ringing with unseen choirs. Departure. The Legion's orders arrived with the same indifference that had first cast him into the desert years before. His name, Jean Renaud, was typed on brittle paper, reassigned to another post, another mask for another battlefield. But by then the mask no longer fit. Jean Renaud was a suit of clothes grown too small, a fiction stretched thin across a man who had become something other. He left the school as one leaves a grave solemn, stripped of illusions. The building had buried a part of him, yet also planted something deeper in the soil of his soul. Before the train, he stood alone in the yard. Snow had receded, but the stones still held winter's chill. He pressed his palm against the wall, feeling the centuries coiled within it. Then, with a voice quieter than prayer, steadier than farewell, he spoke a command that was also a benediction. Stay silent. It was not for the stones. It was for what lived behind them, for the footsteps that walked with no owner, for the voices that seeped through plaster. He carried silence with him now, but it was no longer empty. It throbbed with presence. Matriarchs whispering in the marrow, soldiers unnamed, shadows bearing witness. And always, always, the scream of a girl dying in childbirth, the sound that had birthed him. That cry had never left him. It never would. He boarded without looking back. Some graves must remain unopened. Closing wait. The world still called him deserter, traitor, fugitive. His name, whichever mask it wore, would never be clean in men's ledgers. But he knew better. He was vessel. He was map. He was promise written in scars and silence. Every step now carried weight. Not the weary weight of burden, but the terrible weight of inheritance. Shadows had chosen him. Not to bless, not to curse, but to continue. Their presence clothed him like armor. Their memory crowned him more surely than any coronation. He no longer feared silence. Silence was not emptiness. It was plenitude. It was the throne of fire with no figure seated, now built into his chest. It was the voice of matriarchs, the cry of mothers, the command of ghosts. Silence was crown, and he wore it, unseen, as he moved once more into the storm of history.